This is an interview with a woman who we have tried to record this interview many times. So it has been technology that has been the issue. And Sue is a psychic. Now, Sue will say that it is the entities around her that are playing with the technology. Welcome, Sue Bishop. She's a metaphysician, a parapsychologist, medium, healer, and a teacher of psychic, spiritual, and personal development. She's the co-founder and director of Kiara College, where she offers courses in metaphysics, psychic development. Welcome, Sue. Were you a psychic as a child yourself?
Yes. You'd find that most kids are psychic up until about the age of 7, when the age of reason kicks in. But a lot of their impressions, a lot of their experiences aren't looked upon as they're being psychic, because we're not given that lens in the West to think of your children as psychic. But everyone is born psychic. Keep the channel open all through their lives. Others, it shuts off before the age of 7, and then they have to train to open up their third eye. But it is not a special gift. The way I see it is it's something we all have, whether you use it or not. If it's like a muscle that hasn't been used for a long time, if you don't use it, the muscle kind of like gets really lazy. And we tend to favour left brain thinking in the West, where everything has to be logical and rational, and we don't favour the intuitive side of the brain. So people think they're not psychic, but they don't realise, no, you're just stuck in your left brain and you're just having to learn how to make the two meet again.
When you were a child, how did you know that you were psychic?
Like a lot of children, I didn't know. I used to take my experiences as they were, because when you're a child, any experience, often when it's new, you just think it's part and parcel of what life's about. So you don't go, wow, I'm having a psychic moment when you're 6 years old. You just go, oh, I'm having an experience. And I grew up in a household where my very Catholic parents weren't big on this kind of thing. And I had an elder sister who they found way in the back of the yard talking and laughing to herself, and they used to think she was going mad. And Dad threatened to take her to an asylum if she didn't stop, because it's embarrassing when people come over and you're running around the backyard talking to yourself, laughing to yourself, as if she's actually talking to people, not talking to herself, so to speak, like invisible people. And she had these two little spirits, brother and sister, that she used to play with. But Dad kept threatening to have her see a psychiatrist, and she got so scared the kids had to go away. And she just shut that channel down. I watched what was going on, thinking no matter what experiences I have, if I find myself talking to someone, Dad might put you to a psychiatrist. So that's why, it's another reason why, I didn't talk about things. Some of the courses I did include psychology. So even though I'm majoring in writing and communications and philosophy, but a lot of people, when they're young, if they're talking to invisible people or seeing events that don't make sense to an adult, it's hard for them to understand that they're having an experience, because sometimes they might timeline into the future, into a different dimension, and it's not making sense. My next door neighbour, she was a school teacher, and her little 3-year-old was starting to open up, and came to me to tell me about the experience. And she'd been unpacking things because she'd only recently moved into the house. And Callie was asleep while she was unpacking a box that had a golf trophy that she put on the top of a bookshelf right at the back, so you couldn't see it from ground level from a child. And down the bottom was a picture of her father, but as he was older. Anyhow, which Callie hadn't seen because these are old ones that she'd put away. And when Callie wakes up, she comes in the room and she looks around and she sees the spirit. She goes, tugs on Fiona, she goes, Mummy, Poppy's here. She goes, what do you mean Poppy's here? Poppy, he says Poppy. And she described what he was wearing, and he had like a line there. The guy used to have, Holden, loved his Holdens, used to have this thing. Now, he'd been dead for 15 years, so there's no way that Callie knew he wore Holden tops with the lion motive. And then she goes, Grandpa's winking, like she couldn't say the word, but she was pointing to the wink, which he used to say to Fiona when he was satisfied with something she had done. And Fiona goes, oh, okay. And then she goes, Poppy said, why did you put his thing up the top there, Mummy? Why isn't it shown? He wants you to show. She goes, what thing? She goes, the tiny little thingy, because she didn't know what golf was. And the mother pulled it down. She goes, yeah, Poppy wants that here, Mummy. And Fiona couldn't believe it, like his golfing trophy. But the kid couldn't see it. And here's Poppy. I see a spirit. But because she knew I was a neighbour and I talked to her about psychic things, she didn't discount what Callie was experiencing. She came right over, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, she's had a psychic experience. But sometimes we override it to our detriment. And this is a really, really sad story, but true. When we first opened up our college, we were based in Parramatta. And a few years in, I got a student called Rita de Brincan, and I didn't know who she was to start with. And she was very angry, and we were trying to teach her, psychic, spiritual, and personal, which means you've got to do some of the inner work. But she was an angry person, and she'd been to some mediumship circle for years, but didn't get very far because in those days that group just liked to keep people there for a long time. So she came over to our group. I said, okay, Spirit's telling me something about your daughter. What happened? There's a trauma near your daughter. And she goes, yeah, my daughter was shot and killed while setting the dining table. And it was a famous case. It made the courts. It was a drive-past shooting that got the wrong house. Now, a week before Tess died, she was upstairs playing, and she was doing tea with an invisible person. And the mother goes, oh, who are you having tea with? And she goes, the nice lady. She goes, which lady? She goes downstairs, there's a picture of her dead sister, of Rita's dead sister. Tess has never met her, but she's seen the photos. The mother thought, oh, look, we have a photo, you probably just imagining, da-da-da. She goes, no, Mummy. She said she's here to take me. She's always going to be near me. And the mother said, oh, imagination. On that Sunday morning, so a week later, Rita and hubby and the kid were at church, and Rita starts hearing bullets. And she's going, that's random. My imagination is doing stupid things. I'm hearing bullets. Thought nothing more of it. They went home. She was in the kitchen. She was getting little testers to put some knives and forks on the dining table, which was at the front of the house. And then she hears the bullets, and her daughter died in her arms. Now, she was angry because she said, I didn't see the signs. She told me she told me that she was coming here because she's going to take her, and I didn't read it. But they didn't, and when I heard the bullets, I didn't know that someone was going, so she was angry at herself that the signs that perhaps something was going to happen, but she couldn't see it was going to happen to her daughter. Yes, the spirit was there. And I had to explain to her that for the spirit to be there 1 week before this event was more than likely going to still happen no matter what you did. And maybe that's the way she had to go, but family was already there with her. And because she'd seen spirits and she was comfortable with them, like the transit would have been, like we knew the aunt would come and collect her along with other things. Spirit guides and I. But from a mother's point of view, it is a very traumatic experience, and it went to the courts, it went through the newspapers, and it caused her a lot of grief. And it happened about 10 years before I met her, so it was out of the media by then. But sometimes, parents will discount what a child picks up. Now, it's hard sometimes to differentiate between a child's imagination because kids can make up big whoppers. You know what I mean? I've had people bring in, 4-year-olds and they go, oh, my child sees this. And I go to the child, okay, who's around you? And I'll tune in to see if I could see someone first and then ask. And if I could see what they had, fine. But sometimes, the kids just, but some parents the other way, they're too much into it and want their kid to be special. So you've got the two extremes, and the only really best way to know if your child is being psychic is that you have to push rationality aside and let the intuitive part come in. Because if you sit there analysing it, you're in left brain thinking, and the rational mind will find a reason and you might discount. My son, he grew up with both parents psychic, and we tried not to push it too fast because you want to nurture a kid, you don't want to throw the kid in the deep end. And also if you tell the kid they might start exploring into realms that they're not going to be able to cope with or attract too much attention from other beings. So we used to say, let's not do much, but as soon as they have an experience, then we'll explain it and then we'll give them the tools. So Tristan will come home from kindy and go, "You should have seen Jane today, Mummy. She's all covered in green." You've seen the aura. Oh, and this person here, I knew he was going to do this, and bang. Kiara would have premonition dreams, and she'll go in the morning, "Mummy, I had a dream there was a new teacher in class today, and I had to do this and this and this." Anyhow, she goes to school. There was the new teacher, as you saw, with the blonde hair, and she had to do this and this. So she was having a premonition dream. And that's another thing. Sometimes dreams can be quite psychic and intuitive, or premonitions of the future, and a lot of parents will go, "It's just a dream," because it hasn't manifested, and it might manifest within a week, 5 years. It's not, the spirit work doesn't work on linear time. It's outside space-time. So just because you have the dream and it's a premonition doesn't mean it's going to happen the very next day. And people forget that, and when it happens a year later, they get this sense of deja vu. Well, you had that premonition, now it's happening. That's one of the reasons for deja vu. There are others.
I really like how you have approached this with your children as well. And I think you're right. I think the more the parent possibly engages and is interested, the more the child is getting the attention perhaps they're looking for. I love that you are letting the children have their experience, coming to you, and then you'll gently guide them as they get older. Now, with your psychic ability, Sue, can you explain to our listeners the difference between clairvoyance, clairsentience, and audience as well? What do you have in your abilities?
Okay. Clairvoyance is when you get pictures. Sometimes you might just get like a shot. Sometimes it might play out like a movie. Clairaudience is when you hear. You might hear a voice outside, like my guides, one of their party tricks. Their party tricks usually happen around 2 or 4 in the morning, because that's when, everything's so quiet and you're half asleep and your mind's uncluttered. And I'd have this loud voice, "Sue," and you jump up and you go, and then they go, "All right, we've got your attention now," but it'd be verbally really loud. Sometimes they like to throw some things around just because I might be so focused on something I'm not paying attention. So the clairaudience, every so often I'll hear an outside voice. Sometimes it is you get this funny pressure on your ears and this piercing, it's hard to explain the sound. It's almost like an echoing and a numbness at the same time outside your ears. And that's my calling card. Stop what you're doing. We need you to tune in. So I could be in the middle of something, and as soon as that starts, it's their way of saying, "We want to talk to you." Clairsentience is a feeling. It's like a knowing without having any information, without, technically seeing or hearing, but you just know this is going to happen. Or I feel this about this person, and you go and you find out that you've plugged in.
So have you got all three of those?
I do, but I prefer clairvoyance and clairsentience. The problem with clairsentience sometimes, like say you're doing a reading person to person, and because you're psychic, you are energetically open up, right? Now, say the person's come in and they're feeling sick, or their mental health is a bit over the shop, or they've got a lot of fear. As soon as you tune in, like you say, right, let's go back, talk to my guides and write things down, but you're connected to the person's energy, you will feel what they're feeling. And sometimes you've got to kind of like just stop, clear it, disconnect, and go, right, now we'll try a different way, because I'm picking up what they're feeling. And I'll go, "Have you had stomach troubles? Is your stomach sore at the moment?" Because I'm feeling that. So the good side is, yes, it means you've tapped in. The bad side is sometimes you're picking up what they're feeling, what they're sensing, what they're experiencing. And some psychics don't know that and don't know how to disconnect, and that can rattle them for days. But this is a really funny example. I was at a party at St. Oyster Bay, and my friend Mark's niece was there, and no one there would talk to her. And I'm going, "Why is everyone avoiding her?" And then I go up and I go, "Well, she looks like she needs someone to talk to." And we started talking, and I saw how fragile she was, and I was getting her to open up. And she says she's a schizophrenic, and she'd just come off her tablets, but a lot of people ostracize her, especially in the family. So I was doing a bit of spiritual counselling to help her, work her energies, look at things differently. Get in the car with kids. Do you think I could navigate out of Oyster Bay to get onto the highway? And I go to Mark's place. We used to go at least once a month. Do you think I could get my way out? Took a about 15 minutes, God knows. And the kids going, Mummy, you're going in circles. It's like, yes, I know, kids. I just can't get out of here. But on the drive home, my headspace was almost psychotic. And everything was just warped. And it was so hard to drive the extra
So
half
are
hour.
you saying you were feeling what she was feeling in her
I'd
life?
enmeshed too much to her energies without realizing it. So I got home, I said, kids, I need a bath. Left them by the TV, went in there, just put the running water to make them think I was having a bath. And I sat there and I had to unmesh from her energies. So while psychic can be great because, wow, I can see this in the future. Oh, this happened in the past. No, sometimes you enmesh too much with people, and this can happen to kids. They can enmesh with other kids, they can enmesh with other adults because we are energy, and sometimes we have what we call field enmeshment, and Einstein would call it spooky activity at a distance, but it's we send out energetic cords and sometimes energetic hooks. When you think about someone, a cord can go to that person. Now, if it's done in unconditional love, best thing. And you can get sense of, even though you're not trying, a sense, and you go, oh, that person's going to call me the next 24 hours, and you haven't seen them for 5 years, and that person calls you.
Yeah.
But the hook ones is when someone's in fear or someone's whatever, and they're thinking about you because they go, well, that person may be able to help me. The negative hook comes in you because they're needing your energy, your strength. Now, can you imagine that happening to a 7-year-old where they're enmeshing with someone else and you don't know it's not yours until you learn how to recognize energy? So some kids are very psychic and they can get amazing information, but sometimes they can also enmesh with others. So the parent then will have to teach that child how to dissolve, how to put a nice energetic boundary. So then when they don't need tapping in, they can stay in their own space.
So in your book, Psychic Kids, do you teach parents this?
Okay, well, basically, it explains what being psychic is, the types of psychic skills, and then there's all these stories from kids that I've met and kids I've interviewed because people came in for me to write the book, collected all their stories, examined everything, just not taking it straight at face value. Sit with the kid and tune in and really get the information. And then I put in little bits of advice, little exercises, meditations, so then the parent can navigate the child through that. So the parent reads it, the parent goes, right, I know what I'm looking for, but there's also plan A, plan B, and things. Like, for example, even on a spiritual level, there's techniques, this thing happened, and then you put it into context. I did have one parent, he believed his daughter was exceptional and he needed to have clearances because she was attracting a lot of negative beings that were going through the home. But she could go down to the creek near their place and say, oh, look, there's Aborigine spirits here, like she could tune in, but at the same time, there was a part of her that then played up on it because the parents were both professionals, very busy. And then she'll go, oh, there's something in my bedroom. And the parents were trying to be intuitive, but they were allowing their fear to project. Now, when your fear projects a thought or a feeling, you create what we call thought forms or phantoms. And if you do it over and over, it can feel real, but it doesn't have a soul consciousness. So sometimes the parent goes, my kid's so psychic, they're bringing in all forms of spirit, and this place is now mad, not realizing what else can happen. So I'm trying to teach parents how to discern between what is genuinely psychic, what things can potentially be misread by a parent or by the child, but also looking at where psychic kids are going, because each generation, the psychic abilities, there's more awareness in the generation. So the kids that are being born now, a lot of them obviously have had past life in different planetary systems because that's what the world needs. They're incarnating. They can still have soul information from their soul overgroup or twin soul to share so they can then reference some past lives in Earth to anchor them in. But a lot of them star children, so to speak. And why does this happen? It's happening more now because Pluto, the planet of transformation, and it's moved into Aquarius. So we're moving into, supposedly, even though the true age of Aquarius, some say it's already started, some go later, but when Pluto's in Aquarius, our society, we're going to see our world change in so many ways. And it is a lot more to do with the stars, a lot more to do with, different levels of consciousness. So you need emerging souls to keep up with the new technology, like in the next 2043. What technology is going to do is mind-blowing. And not only is Pluto there, but we've got Uranus has just moved into Gemini. Information is going to be like crazy, AI explosion. And so we're going into a different level of technology to what you and I grew up in. Souls that were born in the 60s grew up to be very service orientated. So in the 80s, we started seeing Doctors Without Borders because the children born in the 60s, Virgo is all about health and well-being and service. And so we're having breakthroughs with Doctors Without Borders and things like that, you know. So each generation will have a different Pluto ruling, and it will show which ones are going to be extremely psychic, which ones are going to be, you know, more intense and more passionate. It's not just that the kids are being born with souls that have these memories will have planetary alignments and the consciousness of the cosmos setting up the energies into the earth to coincide. And for parents to keep up with it, you know, some do, some don't, hence why the book is trying to get that. But we are going to find kids becoming it's like I said, everyone's always been psychic, but there's more awareness of it and more activity, whereas in the old days it was pushed away. It's just, you know?
Yeah. So tell me, so about reincarnation, I also want to learn more about star children, but let's start with reincarnation. Can you please explain how that works as far as you know?
Okay. Basically, the way we see it is your soul is part of your spirit. Now, some people will use the terms the other way, but the way I see it is your spirit is multifaceted and it stays in the astral, or some would call the heavens. And it lives also with what we call a group oversoul, which is screens of souls from one archangelic lineage, whatever, but they're all at different levels of evolution. So it stays there. You might call it fifth dimensional, but that's where it stays. But when it wants to incarnate, it'll take a fragment of itself as a new soul, comes down, and it has certain programs. Now, this new soul will borrow this trauma, this gift, this love experience, this negative experience from this lifetime, this lifetime. It doesn't just grab it all from the previous lifetime. So before it incarnates, because when you're in the astral or in the heavens, there are no traumas, no fears, whatever. It's beyond that. As the soul starts to ascend, it comes down the 7 levels of the astral. It's programmed, each chakra is programmed with information from past lives to make this new composite soul. But it has embedded in the chakras memories. Now, these memories will erupt at the same time, say, as in the age as when it happened back then. So, for example, say you've incarnated to be a nun, yeah? Mm-hmm. But you've come from past lives where situation was that you had to sell your body for survival of your children, and society was horrible to you and you had a lot of damage, you weren't accepted. So you had poor body consciousness. So say, for example, you've incarnated with South Node and Scorpio. These people always have had to sell themselves short for money in some past lives. But they're coming in this lifetime to go the opposite direction. A lot of them come back to in lifetimes in Taurus, where they have to amount physical wealth, emotional or spiritual wealth. Say this prostitute comes back and she wants to reclaim sense of personal worth and value. And by becoming a nun, spiritual worth, that she's not going to sell herself short, that she's going to have a community that respect her. You know what I mean? So you are balancing up. Now, some of the challenges in this life will be based at the age of 19, this happened. So when you're 19, the energy from the seed pot will erupt to draw experiences, but you have the opportunity to do it differently because you have a new mindset, a new persona, and you can then repair that trauma. Now, some people...
And you mean past life trauma?
Yeah, because your soul will program that in for you to get it right this time. So that's a form of coming forward to healing. There's been a lot of research in children, because a lot of children, especially back in the days before computers, how are they going to get the information about a certain place and like now? One of the most well-known cases is the case of Shanti Devi. And she was, I can't remember, it's 1925 or 1926. So when she was 3, she started talking to her parents about her husband, what he looked like, where he lived, you know, all these kind of things. But being Indian, Indians are open to reincarnation, but they're not really fully indoctrinated. Come on, kid, tap into this past life. They will allow it to surface. By the age of 7, she wouldn't shut up about it and kept saying, I've got to go home. Well, India, back in the 1930s, didn't have the greatest, communication channels, like if you lived in this village, you may live there forever and you would not know much about a village, especially if you've born into a poor village like she was, to go 200 miles away and,
She wouldn't know what is there.
That's right. So they found a way to track down the surnames, and it took a while, and they found out who they think it was. So they wrote a letter, and then these people come, a man and a young boy. And she looks at him, she goes, my husband has a mole, much fairer than you, and wears glasses. You're his brother. And the parents look at him and goes, oh, we thought we'd trick her to see, how good she was. And she looked at the boy and she goes, you're my son. I died giving birth to you. So she died in 1925. That's right, the former person. And Shanti incarnated pretty quickly the next year. So 1926. So her son was 1 year older than her. So anyhow, they were at the station in this new town, and she was told to go find her old house. She goes, oh, that's easy. It's near a temple and near the clothes shop that my husband had. So she walked there. She had the cellular memory. She goes into the house, and the funniest thing, she goes up to the bedroom. She walks into the thing where she had this drawer thing or pot, but that's where she kept some money. And she goes, puts her hands on hips, goes to the husband, where's my money? And how dare you marry? You told me on my deathbed you're never going to get married. Now, it was well documented. The Indian government documented this case. So it's not like just a researcher, but that level of information in a time where, it was hard to access. Like nowadays, you can jump onto a computer and go, oh, I think I'm an air pilot in World War II, and I downed in that, because you can Google it. But back then, they couldn't do this kind of things.
No.
So you get some people who have children that grow up to be adults that have fears that they've had all their life, but they haven't had an experience. Like they'd say they have a fear of water, yet they haven't had a drowning experience or some kind of trauma associated with
water. So that's coming from their ancestral memories.
Yeah, so they may have drowned, or, there could have been a tidal wave or something. So,
yeah.
And they're walking around this life going, I just don't go near water. And it's an unrealised fear. And the reason it's hard to get rid of to start with is because most psychiatrists will look at your childhood. But if it's not there because it's from a past life, you're not going to get very far. But you do have two authors. Dr. Brian Weiss, he was a psychiatrist at a hospital and had a lot of children there. Morse, and Dr. Moody as well. And with Weiss, he had a lady that kept having all these traumas and so many fears. And so he finally couldn't work it through psychiatrically. So eventually said, I'm going to do hypnotherapy. And she goes back and sees his past lives, and it explains all the traumas. Whereas Dr. Moody was also at a hospital. He was with children, and they had a case, I think it's little Catherine, from a Mormon family or a Seventh-day Adventist, one of the families where they don't believe in spirit guides and things like that. So the child's not indoctrinated. She's virtually drowned in the pool. They've taken her to hospital. She dies for a few minutes. She's resuscitated. And when she comes to, the mother was at the hospital, the rest, the father and the children at home, and she could tell them what they were watching on TV. And that when she was dead, she goes, I went to this special place and there was my guide. Her name was Elizabeth, and she had really long hair, and there's two little boys that are going to be incarnated, and Elizabeth said I had to come back, and that da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, in their religious circle, they don't believe in this stuff. Yet she could talk about reincarnation, talk about what was happening at the house. And that got Moody interested in finding out from other kids that have had near-death experiences what kind of things, because they were less documented. And I think this was in the 80s or 90s. And he started to find that there were all these kids that were experiences of the spirit world. So, but she could see, these two boys are going to be reincarnated, and they didn't have a word for reincarnated at home or at school, because she went to one of their Mormons or Seventh-day Adventist schools. So we have, through a lot of children, learned a lot about the fact that they can see the spirit world, that they understand past lives. Some of them, this is another child. I mean, the Dalai Lama is a classic example, how he's chosen, and he had to identify objects of the Dalai Lama that's just died, and how they bring all these false ones as well. But the priests get the vision of where to go to find him, because they have to go and find him. He's not just born into the network, and they have to test him, and the kid has to know this and know that and just quote all these things.
Intuitively.
Yeah, but there was this other guy called Arthur Feverfew. As a kid, he grew up in England, working class, and always had dreams and visual memories in his waking state of being in a semi-arid kind of place and being up in a cave, but being a soldier. And, years and years went past. He's in his 80s, but all his life he had this visual memories. He had this deja vu, same place. He's watching a BBC document, and they're doing Petra Jordan, which wasn't as well known like Egypt, Rome, Greece, everyone knows about. But Petra Jordan, not many books, not people know about it. There's no way he knew about it. He didn't go to university. There was no books around for him to know this. And he's watching it and he goes, they've got this wrong. Some up and they think, oh God, who's this fuddy-duddy, And he starts saying, well, if you go over there where the well is and then go over there, dig there, you'll find this. If you go up into the cave over there, you'll find the bodies of soldiers. Okay, so they went and did one of the digs and they found what he said. And it's like coming over, they flew him over to Petra, and he's basing all these memories from his past life, but they were getting the validation and it was all being documented, like filmed and everything. Now, that's why we know past lives do happen, because there are some startling cases, but sometimes if you go into a meditation, you can take yourself through there. But you also find little kids will often intuitively know they'll like certain countries, they won't like certain cultures, or they'll have these little flashes, and, if under the right guidance, you could get them to really tap in and see that. But yeah, we all reincarnate, but the reincarnation is that we're trying to clear karmas. But because when you first come in, it's about a journey. Doesn't matter how many lives it takes, it's not a race, but we all do it differently. So every cycle, you might come in doing the polarity of that last life or the 1, 3 before. And you're here to repair parts of yourself by removing the fears. When you resolve a fear, the energy clears from the aura. So when you return back to spirit, back into the heavens, that's not on your to-do list next lifetime. Some people are here for a short time to teach their parents something. Like we had, this is a bit of a sad story, but mums and dads had really good friends that lived a few streets from us, and their son Tony had a son called Marcus, and he had one brother that was Catholic priest, and Tony's boy at 18 months was diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumour. They could only cut half of it out, but they didn't tell the mother because the mother was traumatised, saying, I've given this to my son. Because she had a brain tumour when she was about 14, but hers wasn't aggressive and it was cured, but this one was. So it was getting hard. And when he started getting sick again, their relationship broke down because she couldn't get over, I'm responsible for this. So the relationship crashes. The priest, who had so much faith and presided on funerals of other kids that had died, going, why has God done this to an innocent soul? And I had to explain to him, going, it's not a punishment. Have you ever thought that some souls, for part of their journey, just want to come into the world to see the world through the eyes of a child, from the purity of the child? And it wasn't meant to make the parents break up or for the priest to lose hope and leave the priesthood. It was to teach them about hope and faith. But they didn't get that lesson because they reacted from their personal space, but reincarnated as the next child. That marriage went, but Tony went on to get married and have kids. Now, one of those children could have been the kid coming back. Sometimes they might skip a generation. Often, if you've had a miscarriage, when you fall pregnant, it's usually the same soul coming back. So I try to explain to people that do have miscarriages that feel like, it's some form of a why did God do this to me? We just say, look, it's a test run. They haven't been in the physical for a while. They just want to test out the body. And look, it's usually the same soul that comes back to you. But it's just how we see it. Everything's about how you look at it. So Tony's trauma could have been viewed differently by the choices he made. But that soul came in for his parents. He didn't need journey, next incarnation, which could have been 5 years, 10 years later, whatever. He'll do the full journey. But it's the same soul, like it's the same spirit, but each time the soul comes with slightly different aspects, but it's still essentially the same, essence. But with a new personality, some new gifts, you look at some kids that
That clearly explains how, for instance, someone who's passed away to me is my father. He died when I was 7, and that explains really well, Sue, that he can be in that astral plane that you're talking about, but also reincarnated. Because it was always strange to me to think, well, hang on, how's he watching over me and my mum and my brothers and his parents and his sister all at the same time?
Look, this is where some mediums get this very confused, because some mediums don't believe in spirits that can come back, and even lost souls. Because no, you go straight to heaven, and we talk to them in heaven. Oh, they're around you, but they've just popped in from heaven. Now, the thing is, the way I've always taught my students is that you've got your overall soul, which is your aura, but you've got a part that's called the astral self, yeah? And that's full of the ego, the sacral chakra, base chakra consciousness. So when someone, say for example, dies by an accident for whatever reason, they're earthbound, that part remains, but the high self crosses. Same way is when you die properly, you've crossed, the lower self gets healed and deprogrammed. The high self part of the spirit comes straight away. They're at their funeral, they're at the house of family. The minute they die, they're around us. They don't have to be healed, and they can stay as long as they want.
Go back a second. Did you just say that if a person dies by accident, it's
Sometimes,
possible that their spirit can
Earthbound.
be stuck here at earthbound? But what happens if they know? What happens if they're dying because that's their time? What happens then?
Look, sometimes it's accidental. It's just jobs for the lower self. The high self is crossed over, and the thing is that the lower self, because it's mostly the ego, has lost the spiritual psychic part of itself. So it might see a white light column with spirits coming to collect it and run the other way. Gone. When I was 23, I was back in Sydney because I did uni in Canberra. I'd just been back, started my first job, and I wanted to test psychics because I'd already bought my own packet of tarots. I knew I was having lots of psychic impressions, but I wanted to see if a psychic could actually. And it was a really stormy night, and we're down in the eastern suburbs in this really beautiful old Federation house, cozy. And I walk in, he goes, "Look, I'm running 20 minutes late, just sit by the fire." And I'm sitting by the fire. And suddenly I see a spirit, and I'm going, "Oh, of course." And it's a little old lady, and she's knitting. She goes, "Isn't it cozy fire? This is my house. I love my house." And I'm going, yep, sure. Beautiful energy, so I wasn't going to go into fear and panic because the essence felt beautiful. I go and have my reading. Halfway through the reading, I go, "Do you know there's a spirit in the house?" He goes, "Oh, the old lady that knits on the lounge." And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, that one."
You saw her. You met her.
Yes, I met her, but she was happy. I'm going, "Why is she still stuck here? She's happy, you know." And he goes, "They can choose, because at the end of the day, when you're in spirit, time stops. It doesn't matter how long you're here." But she chose to remain because she was so attached to her house. Some it's trauma that they don't want to. Some it's accidents, but in general, most cross. Now, some can take 2 weeks to cross over, some can take 20 years, but they're just living in the moment like a dream. So they don't go, "I've been here for 20 years, time stops." So they still think they're living in some kind of a dream.
Yeah.
The rest cross over, but at the point of death, on a proper crossover. So with my uncle, I sent Stephen to the hospital on Friday night because the kids were very little. And I said, "I think my grandmother's there. I think Uncle Frank's only got a few days. He's dying of cancer." So Stephen went there and he checked it out. He saw my grandmother and he tried to say to my aunt, "You've got to get prepared." And she's in total denial, doesn't want to know about it. He came home and I said, "Look, we'll better ring up his sons," because I said, "I think he's going to go Monday morning." He goes, "That's what I've been told." Later on that night, when I'm in bed, because I do like to question spirit and get experiences, because that's how we learn. And I'm stuck and my body's frozen, and these energies were just buzzing off my hand like beams of little atoms everywhere. I couldn't sleep. The next day it was there, the next day it was there. And I'm going, "Stephen, everything is shaking. It's like layers are coming off me." And then I go, "Okay, spirit, what is it?" And they go, "Well, you want to know what it felt like, the death experience? Well, we're showing you the movement of the energies, because it goes in, it goes first, the etheric body is the last." Anyhow, so Uncle Frank did die, but on Friday night when Aunt was at the hospital, they said, "Look, we'll review him on Monday." They didn't say he was going to be dead. We will review him. Monday morning, just before 6, she wakes up, and by the foot of her bed is her husband's soul. And she's going, no, Frank, you're not meant to be here, Frank. What are you doing here? And then the phone rings and the hospital says, oh, your husband died 10 minutes ago. He'd come to visit her. They come to their funerals. I can tell you the amount of funerals I've been to and people say, can you see the person? Can you tell me a message? But that's the higher self. And that's a part that comes and visits and stays. The lower self gets deprogrammed back. So it's just your pure highest potential. And this is what confuses some mediums because they go, Uncle George he's a grumpy man. He's just snapping around. And I'm going, they're not grumpy when they're being all the deprogramming, the healing. They're just pure, spirit.
That was that particular life and that particular lesson, not the whole entity.
But if they said to the person, oh, we've got Uncle George, God, he's divine energy, they're not going to relate. So they will project their responses on how they were and the way you expect them to scold you and say this. They're not going to expect, So that's why mediums go, oh, no, this one's still an angry thing. No, it's just they will present how
So I think it's incredible what you can do. And I love the fact that you teach this as well, because everybody is a little bit psychic. Everybody has their own experiences. And the fact that you're supporting the parents as well as the children.
So kids are a gift in so many ways when we want to look at that these souls chose us. We didn't choose them. They chose us. They see the big network of where the family goes, and they still choose. Like when children are born into a difficult household, people go, why would you want to choose that? But the soul doesn't see it as that way. They go, look, in the bigger picture, ABC is meant to happen and you've signed up for it. You've chosen difficult parents to learn to be a healer or to learn to be stronger, to be a leader, There are gifts. And they're always reflecting to us what we need to see in ourselves. So if we saw children in that light, we'd get a lot of healing and find a lot of peace in our lives. Once when we learn what their journey is and honour them, but knowing they've come here for us, not just for themselves.
So, Bishop, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
All three of my children displayed the very same psychic experience. I have had lots of, I'm going to say they're more than coincidences. I see 1111 all the time, and that tells me I'm on the right path and continue on. Yes. And then my children, and that's the reason that I wanted to speak with you today, because I didn't know how to respond. Eventually they got it through to me, but at first I just thought they were making it up. But they were not, because it was the exact same story from all three at different times.
But the thing is, you grew up in an environment where you weren't told about psychic things. So
No.
Parents aren't at fault in the sense that if you're not being given a background in it, how are you supposed to know? You've always been told by the system that it's their imagination. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sue Bishop.
Oh, it's a pleasure.